for round number 9. Hello everyone, welcome to Good Morning Magic. It's round number 9 here at Grand Prix Bologna. Rich Hagan here in the commentary box, shortly to be joined by Tim Willoughby and Frank Karsten. It's the Grafensteiner brothers and Christian Seibold on the left of screen against Strasky, Hendricks and Flock. And we are about to get underway on table A, that's why they're in yellow. Toby Grafensteiner against Andre Strasky, and here with the call to get us going, it's a very good morning to Tim Willoughby.
A very good morning to you, Rich. And it looks like we have, well, red on both sides of the table, but for Grafensteiner, he is on red-blue wizards. Meanwhile, Andre Strasky, he has, for my money, probably the most aggressive colour combination in this Dominaria Limited. He's kicking things off with red-white. He's got that Centaur Corsa, Pegasus Corsa. Pegasus Corsa, a card that's gone up in my estimation quite a bit over the course of playing with this format. It does just mean that you can consistently push through damage.
Yeah, and meanwhile Tobias Grafensteiner is on red-blue with two cards that nicely explain what this archetype is all about. Vodalian Arcanist is a card that taps for a colorless mana, but you can only spend it on instants or sorceries. And Naban, the Dean of Iteration, well, he will copy any, let's say, enters the battlefield ability of wizards. So red-blue, it's all about wizards and instants and sorceries.
Yeah, and there's quite a lot of coming into play triggers for wizards, especially once you get a chance to kick some of the, especially the red wizards that have kicker costs on them. So yeah. Naban definitely will be doing some work there, and also we have now got a legend in play, which means that if there, for example, are any legendary sorceries to worry about, well, no big worries there.
Yeah, good examples of red wizards with enters the battlefield abilities are Fire Fist Adept, which can ping opposing creatures, or Gitu Chronicler, which can return instant or sorceries from your graveyard. Also both of the Journey Mages, well, there we have one, and that gets doubled. Double bounce.
Super powerful, the Academy Journey Mage, when you get to bounce two things. Also, it's a 3-2 that only costs 4 when you have another wizard in play. Tobias Grafensteiner definitely meets that requirement. At 5 mana, still a reasonable enough card, but definitely gets much more exciting when you've got the kind of board that Tobias Grafensteiner can pair it with.
You guys have seen a lot more Magic than I have this weekend so far, but I was interested to see that Sergeant at Arms on turn 3. For the most part, that feels like a 6 mana card.
That's true. We have seen a lot of cards being kicked yesterday. On the whole, I mean, we didn't get precise numbers, but give or take, about 90,000 mana was spent yesterday by all players in all matches on kicking spells. That said, these kicker cards are best because of the flexibility that they provide. Early on, especially when you're facing a board full of opposing creatures, you want to develop your own board and spend your mana to play any creature, better than just passing the turn with nothing when you're getting pummeled. But yeah, the flexibility of spending additional mana in the late game gives you some flood protection.
Sanctum Spirit, the play from Andre Strasky here as he's passed back to Tobias Grafensteiner. 4 mana up for Grafensteiner, and he's got a few options available. Hasn't quite figured out what he wants to be doing with them just yet. The Spirit, kind of a nice one. I like the fact that it threatens to be indestructible, but you can never really be sure about that.
Yeah, I mean, when I'm playing against Sanctum Spirit, most of the time I don't care too much about the indestructible ability, because quite often the historic cards that opponents might have in hand could actually be better than a Sanctum Spirit on the battlefield. I mean, most of the legends that you might discard are actually pretty powerful. That said, Andre does seem to be, you know, a little bit light on lands, so then turning a legend in hand into effectively a free Sanctum Spirit does become appealing. That said, do you really want to trade it for a 2-1? Well, you don't want to trade a 3-2 for a 2-1, but that Naban might have some nice late game abilities. Who knows what other wizards Tobias might have.
Yeah, it's interesting. We were talking before we came on air about the difficulties of building in Team Sealed, how to split things out. In some respects, once you see that you've got something like Naban, that might make your decisions a little easier. You then do a quick wizard count and get a feel for whether or not there are some inherent synergies there. Naban, not the kind of card I would expect to see too much of if there weren't those synergies.
True. In general, 2/1s for 2 mana or 2/2s for 2 mana are not that great in the format. They get outclassed easily, lots of 2/3 creatures that turn into roadblocks. But it's definitely a relevant ability on the card for red-blue wizard decks.
So a kicked Sheevan Fire there, dealing with Pegasus Corsair. Respect from Tobias Grafensteiner for the Pegasus.
And also lots of respect for the Sanctum Spirit. That's why he's also not attacking with the Academy Journey Mage. He does want to ensure having a blocker for Sanctum Spirit. Ooh.
Oh, is that a haphazard bombardment?
I do expect 4 lands to be targeted here. Oh yeah, this is a triple Stone Rain, which is just insane against an opponent. Kind of stuck on mana. Strasky has missed, I think, 2 land drops in a row. This is gonna be brutal.
Oh dear. Oh dearie, dearie, dear. I thought they weren't printing land destruction anymore.
I mean, this does so much more than that, though.
So much more than reads, you win the game.
I mean, many people have been talking about Fall of the Tran in Dominaria as an Armageddon reprint, but honestly, Haphazard Bombardment might actually be the better land destruction card.
Oh, that's just brutal. Happy Sunday morning, Andre Strasky. Bet you're glad you got out of bed.
And this was an interaction that you actually highlighted on your bucket list. There is also the potential for this Haphazard Bombardment to get bounced and replayed by Tobias Grafensteiner.
Oh my God.
Because he does have the appropriate color of mana to find either a rescue, which lets you return a permanent, or potentially he could have another option in there, a Blink of an Eye potentially.
He has 2 copies of Blink of an Eye in his deck, so we could easily be seeing that, even as the Vodalian Arcanist to pay for a Blink of an Eye. Yeah, and if you actually bounce it back to your hand and replay it, you get to dish out 4 additional aim counters, which means that the second Haphazard Bombardment actually gets to kill the full 4 permanents, because the aim counter from the very first one is still remaining. So that is an absolutely brutal combo for a card that is already making very short work of Strasky's mana base.
So Quende Pride of Femeref comes down, powering up every creature with First Strike on the battlefield, on his side of the battlefield, should I say. Quite a lot of creatures with First Strike available within Red-White, and of course the somewhat impressive combo when you're able to achieve it of Warlord's Fury, giving your entire team First Strike, which then in turn turns into Double Strike. But for now, the big concern for Andre Strasky is trying to keep lands on the battlefield.
Yeah, well, there's not much that he can do about it. I mean, if he has some disenchant effects, like Invoke the Divine, in his sideboard, he may be interested in bringing those in to prevent this from occurring again. But at this point, there's nothing much he can do apart from, well, I mean, using his mana to the best of his ability, hoping to draw some additional lands over the course of the next few turns, and also hoping that there's not going to be Blink of an Eye bouncing that Haphazard Bombardment for, well, another go at it.
Frank, how do you value Serra Disciple? Quende obviously acts very well with a 1/1 flying first strike that becomes, by definition, 2 damage, and then if you can pump it with a historic spell, then it's 4 damage. Would you expect Strasky to be playing all the common copies of Serra Disciple because he's got a Quenda in his deck, or is it not? Is it still not really good enough?
I would usually play most of my copies of Serra Disciple when I have Quende. I think that interaction is already powerful enough.
Mm-hmm.
Also, in general, I'm somewhat happy with Serra Disciple in my deck. This is a format where you get into a lot of board stalls, which increases the value of evasion.
Mm-hmm.
Any creature with flying, even if it sometimes only has 1 power, is gonna be fine as a way to break through. And white decks often have more historic permanents or spells than other decks, because the whole historic team is a bit more centered around the Esper Shard. So I think a reasonable amount of time you will be attacking for 2 in the air. So even without Quende it's already fine, but with Quende in the deck it's well worth playing.
In Bowler's clutches here in order to steal one of the better creatures on Andre Strasky's side of the battlefield, and This battlefield looking more and more lopsided with each and every play coming from Tobias Grafensteiner here.
He could have actually have stolen the planes. It's ancient permanent.
Oh my! The legendary planes.
Yes.
That's Craig Wesco's invitational card, I think.
Pretty much. Not too often that you see the 6-mana annex that could in principle have taken a creature, but you know what, we can do better.
It's the red-blue land destruction archetype.
That has been known before, the old Magnivore deck with all of its wildfires and boomerangs. But right now we're talking limited, and Tobias Grafensteiner doing a pretty good job of dealing with the lands in play for Straczky, meaning that essentially there are not too many spells for him to have to deal with. Getting to attack in here, Lumbering Cyclops getting in there. Yes, there was a trade, but I think that this is very much in the hands of Grafensteiner, and in fact Daniel Grafensteiner on our middle table has already picked up his game 1 against Thomas Hendricks, so Team Grafensteiner doing all right.
Here comes the intervention.
A fiery one at that.
I mean, imagine you're Thomas Hendricks, the teammate of Andrei Straczky, looking over, right after you finish your own game, just look over to Andrei, hey, how's it going? And you see, what happened here? You have 2 lands, your opponent has 6.
Yeah, why did you keep 2 lands?
Yeah.
I was on the draw. Or actually, just better. Sorry.
It would be well within Straczky's range.
It really would, wouldn't it?
A little shrug and a wink, maybe.
No, that was brutal. I mean, Haphazard Bombardment has impressed me quite a lot whenever I see it. Often it's like a kind of a random triple Vindicate on just good creatures on the other side, giving a bit of card advantage and some removal in one package. But when you can use it for the land destruction ability, wow.
So I'm going to take a wild stab in the dark here and guess that even Flock, who's still in game 1, is playing a slow, grindy control deck that almost certainly features islands.
Well, that would be the perfect Ivan Floch deck.
And there we
It's
go.
a slow, grindy deck that largely features forests and swamps. If you're looking for a slow, grindy deck, to be honest, this is the slowest and grindiest of decks that you find in the format.
That's fair, because blue is more sort of tempo, isn't it?
Yeah, so typically what you see with the green-black decks is that they have lots of saprolings, but they also have the best ability to splash, and that's kind of what we're seeing enacted here, because both of these green-black decks have got a little red splash, and we can see for Ivan Floch what that is, which is Kazarov Sengir Pureblood. This is one of those cards that, given appropriate time and mana, can really put a hurting on any board state. One of the most important things in this team-sealed format is having a way of breaking board stalls. One side of the table we've got a Thorn Elemental, the other side of the table we have Kazarov. The difference being that Christian Seibold the one on 5 life here, and that means that he's very much on the rough side of things. Ultimately, this game going to Ivan Floch.
Yeah, and I'll tell you what, Ivan is not just splashing a single mountain for Kazarov. He's also splashing an island
For Tatyova.
No, for Muldrota, the Gravetide.
Oh, okay.
So
even more reasonable.
Well, yeah, I mean, that is a very powerful gold card, well worth splashing for if you have a couple fixers, which he does, double grow from the ashes, that helps. But this does feel like the perfect Ivan Floch deck. Slow, grindy, couple late game win conditions, take it easy. Of course he has the last game to finish, but that is what he loves to play.
You'll notice that we've got synchronized shuffling going on here and a little bit of chat about how to best sideboard and plan for following games. You're not missing any magic right now as everyone prepares to get into their game 2.
So while that happens, and we're going to go back to the Toby Grafensteiner against Andrei Straczky, because who doesn't like Armageddon on one side of the table? Just to fill you in on some of the things that have been happening overnight. In our other Grand Prix in Columbus, Sam Kuprovitz, James Bush and Ryan Rowland, who've been playing together for many years, but not with a ton of public results, one might say, are the one perfect record at day one at Grand Prix Columbus. 7-1, couple of well-known teams: Steve Rubin, Alex Hayden, Mike Sigrist, Sam Black, Matt Severa, Andy Beckstrom. And then at 6-2, I guess the biggest four teams would be Hall of Famers all the way: Paula Vida, Dama de Rosa, Eric Froelich, Ben Stark, Ely Cassis, Noah Walker, Shaheen Sarani. 6-2, Neil Oliver, Ben Whites, Eric Severson, and also the very successful team of Paul Rietzel, Dave Williams and Matt Sperling. Regular viewers will notice that we didn't mention William Jensen, Reed Duke and Owen Turtenwald, the Peach Garden Oath. They went 4-3 and are eliminated on day one. Now, of course, in a sense that's a shock because they're so great, but on the other hand, eventually you have one of those days, and they had one of those days, and so they shrug and move on, and they'll be back and remain one of the great favourites to win the Team Pro Tour. So let's here we go with game number 2 of Toby Gravenstein and Andre Strasko. We'll bring you more updates from this tournament here in Bologna when we get a moment, but Gravensteiner and Strasky getting ready for their game 2.
So just as Strasky takes a mulligan here, I've got a question for you, Frank, and it relates to Haphazard Bombardment, not so much for sealed, but for draft. It looks to me like the kind of card that, because you're not casting it until turn 6, draft is potentially a slightly faster format. How early or late are you planning on? Like, if you see this pack 1, pick 1, do you just move in, or is it something that you kind of wait to get a feel for what your deck's doing before you take a chance on?
My feeling right now is that it is roughly on par with, let's say, the top commons in the set. I wouldn't always first pick it if it is in the pack. There are surely some good rares and uncommons, perhaps even Shivan Fire type cards that I would take over it. But as I mentioned, the card has been impressing me so far. Even though the random aspect might lead you astray, it is a strong card that will almost always make your deck and do a lot of work.
Mesa Unicorn coming in here, the 2/2 with lifelink, good solid body, kind of the combination of Mesa Pegasus from original Alpha and of course Pearled Unicorn.
Well, Strasky missed a land drop there, it looked like, though he did draw his third planes on this very turn. Generally speaking, Mesa Unicorn not all that impressive, because 2/2 creatures in this format, they easily get outclassed. Also, games tend to go long, so if you draw it in the late game, not so great. But if you can send it into the air with Pegasus Courser, suddenly that lifelink becomes harder to stop, and then it's actually a good team.
So Gitu Journey Mage into Divination for Tobias Grafensteiner, currently in setup mode, trying to get everything moving along nicely, ultimately having to discard there at the end of turn.
And that was a Coldwater Snapper going away, wasn't it?
Yeah, Coldwater Snapper really good against the decks that are actually planning on throwing a bunch of removal around. That hexproof can be very problematic to deal with, but in other circumstances, just a big body that costs 6, then if you only got 3 mana, maybe the one that needs to get discarded.
Well, so Gravensteiner doing his best to, survive. Both players still stuck on 3 mana, but have plenty of things to play. Strasky could attack with, let's say, his entire team. Maybe give Mesa Pegasus some flying. Attack with the Capuchin as well.
Yeah, Daneth the Capuchin, just a raft of abilities that make blocking her a little bit fiddly in this early stage of the game.
Gravensteiner could try to double block Danita Capuchin, but that's going to be a bit risky in the face of a potential pump spell or, say, Gideon's Reproach. So just going for the more safe play of trading off with the Pegasus.
All Pegasus all the time for Andre Strasky. Gets a second copy of Pegasus Corset in play.
Yeah, in general, we haven't seen a lot of aggression in this format, with like these white decks being pretty much the sole exception. With 3 drops like Pegasus Courser, but also Davonon Trapper, white decks are actually decent at going on the offense, and that is also what Strasky is showing here.
And we have Quende teaming up with Daneth the Capuchin here. First strike turns into double strike with a little bit of lifelink as well. A big swing from Strasky, and Tobias Grafensteiner down to just 7 life here.
Yeah, and she's going to fly again next turn if he kills one of the Pegasus Coursers. Yeah.
Yeah, this is, potentially lethal.
1-1, here we come. Probably.
And this is the reason we started with this game, of course, in our sequence of game 2s. there's such potential for aggression with Stratsky that it means we can just get more magic in, and we'd love to show you as much magic as possible.
That's the official reason. The unofficial reason is that Rich loves land destruction, and if you can show me a haphazard bombardment again, I'm going to put that on the stream. It's quite simple.
You are evil.
I am. You're right. I thought everyone knew that by now.
Fiery bombardment there.
Intervention.
Apologies there. Dealing with Quende.
Yep. Also know that Stratsky still has only 4 planes, but his deck can operate almost completely off of just a planes mana base. He has 11 of them in his deck, also to support the triple-colored Benalish Marshal, with only a very light red splash for Tiana, Ship's Caretaker, 2 copies of that one, while he continues the beats in the air.
Yes.
Let me count the ways that game could end there. Almost every creature proving to be, if not lethal on its own, very close. That one's going to be going to a game 3, and we get a chance to jump across to see a little bit of Daniel Grafenstein against Thomas Hendricks in the middle table. Now, Thomas Hendricks was the first person we saw on camera to be playing red-blue. This time round, obviously, Tobias Grafenstein was playing red-blue, and Hendricks again on red-blue today. Yesterday he was on a very potent Wizards deck. We will see whether or not he's been able to match up with that, because these players have got new sealed decks that they're working with on this second day. So regardless of how impressive the pools were that got people through to Sunday, now they need to work with a new set of 12 boosters to come up with a new set of decks. And we have black-white in the hands of Daniel Grafensteiner. How does that archetype tend to break down, Frank?
Well, black-white is often like a Legendary Matters theme, especially with Arvad, the white-black gold card. But at this point it looks like Grafensteiner is far ahead in this game and likely going to take the entire match. Yep, tapping down the only blocker of Hendricks with Davenon Trapper, getting it in for the kill.
All right, well, that means that I would guess that Ivan Floch and Christian Seibold are just kicking off their game. That's likely to be the one that is starting soonest, I would imagine. And
yeah, I mean, they may have not even got as far as the start of the game. They may still be Seibolding.
Well, something. We have some Zeppelins over here with Ivan Floch. Just a lone skittering surveyor for Christian Seibold. Looks like the Seibold part of this board is not really developing at all. He's played a couple of removal spells and interactive cards, but it looks like Floch is gonna double the power and toughness of all of his Zeppelin tokens there.
Now, that was Ivan Floch resolving an Adventurous Impulse. The 1 green mana sorcery that lets you look at the top 3, reveal a creature or land card and put it into your hand. Yep. Adventurous Impulse, on the face of things to me, seems like it really smooths out the way that your deck's draws go. If you're lacking on lands a little bit, it'll find them. If what you need is a creature, then it will find them. Is it the kind of card that maybe even lets you run cut back on lands a little bit if you want to be aggressive?
Sometimes. I mean, I've had people call it the Green Ponder, or effectively it's more like Oath of Nissa. It is the type of card that can find its way into most green decks, given that it just smooths your draws. If you have 2 of them, you can usually cut a land. Although you should be careful not to cut too many lands, because once you start cutting forests, then it can become difficult to actually cast the turn 1 Adventurous Impulse and then get into very awkward draws. But with like a Llanowar Elf and an Adventurous Impulse, going down on the land is acceptable.
And right now, of course, Ivan Floch, his cup runneth over when it comes to different types of lands. Just a plane short of full domain, and we recognise that that's probably not going to be happening in this game. But as things stand, he can cast almost everything in his deck. He's up to 6 mana already. Vicious Offering there, dealing with Spore Crown Thallid. That seems to be the clear target. It takes an awful lot of power off the board with all of those saplings that were being pumped by the Fungus Lord. And everyone gets to do a bit more skittering.
Didn't Seibold block one of the Zeppelins if he was going to kill the Spore Crown Thallid? Seems a bit weird. Either way, Vicious Offering is one of the better removal spells in the format. Good early and good late. That is the hallmark of a nice card to have. That said, Seibold did see like powerful cards in game 1, like the Karzarov, the Sengir Pureblood. And he may have been holding that Vicious Offering in the hope of, sacrificing Skittering Surveyor to take down that big flyer. But he was just forced into action when 4 2/2 Zeppelins came his way.
And yet another Skittering Surveyor coming along from Seibold there. Almost inevitably going to be the creature that gets put in the deck that needs to have a splash.
So I'm going to take a bold stab in the dark here and imagine that even Flock may close this one out with his large army against 2 Skittering Surveyors. Not certain, but what is certain is that Toby Grafensteiner against Andre Strasky could decide the match for the Germans. So why don't we head back across to table number 1 in just a minute, and we'll try and get you game 3 of that one, because even if Flock does win here, that cannot win the match for Strasky, Hendricks and Flock, but the Grafensteiner-Strasky match could determine it. Ooh, Soul Salvage, really? Didn't expect to see much of that.
Getting back not only the Spore Quantalet, but also the Territorial Allosaurus, a fighting dinosaur. Looks pretty good for Flock here, indeed.
Yeah, I can certainly live with a bit of Soul Salvage. The Black Divination, or one of the Black Divinations, should I say. Strasky here, currently on mono white and facing down a Siege Gang Commander, amongst other things.
Well, that is pretty powerful. A good reason to play red in your pool. So this is suddenly looking very good for Grafensteiner. I mean, his Rampaging Cyclops can block one of the knights. He can block the Knight of New Benalia with a Goblin token. Not really taking a lot of damage in the process on the next attack. And then he might untap with Siege Gang Commander up. Lots of mana to shoot down any additional threats that Strasky might play. And he even has like his signature Adelis, the Cinderwind. That's the red, blue, gold uncommon, which is getting in for a bunch. Yeah, Toby is super far ahead here.
It's definitely going to be a rough one, and this is yet another card that works very nicely with the copies of Blink of an Eye that we know are in Tobias Grafensteiner's list.
Oh yeah, a bunch of Siege Gang. Effectively get 6 more damage to dish out. Pretty good.
Yeah, and that's mainly the reason that I would say that Siege Gang Commander at its very best in a red-blue list. Obviously, a super powerful card no matter which colours you end up playing, as long as some of them are red, I suppose. Siege Gang Commander, though, is getting taken out there by Blessed Light. Exiled, will not be taking part in the rest of this game. The 3 Goblins do remain, though, so not too much of a waste of mana there for Grafensteiner. They both spent 5 mana. Grafensteiner still has 3 Goblins, and Andre Strasky just has to be satisfied with not having to deal with the commander itself.
Yeah, this is exactly why Siege Gang Commander is one of the better rares in the entire format. Other rare bombs, well, they just get dealt with via Blessed Light in a fair 1-for-1 trade, and you have nothing shown left over for your investment. The Siege Gang Commander, well, he kind of demands an answer. You don't want to let your opponent untap with that. But yeah, there's still 3 goblins left over that can chum block, attack at some point. It's a big swing, and one of the reasons why many people were excited about seeing Siege Gang Commander, not just in Limited, but even in Standard. Uh-oh. Rich, you're gonna love this.
Haphazard Bombardment comes back, and once again, it's going to go on 4 lands.
Yeah, probably smart not to target the Memorial, because Strasky has the opportunity of sacrificing that himself. Just the basics. It's the red-blue land destruction plan all over again. And this is how people often decide at random. It's going to be a bit hard to, like shuffle these things around and then put them face down, pick at random. You just roll a dice. Here's a d20. 1 through 5 goes on a mountain. 6 through 10 on the first planes, and so on.
Now, hitting that mountain on the very first roll there had the potential to be devastating. As it turns out, there was another mountain in hand for Andre Strasky, that meaning that he was able to get Tiana into play.
Yep. And also, as I mentioned, Strasky is not playing a lot of red in his deck. 2 copies of Tiana were the only main deck cards. So it does stabilize the board somewhat. Provides a flying blocker for the Adelis, and yeah, no real attacks possible for Grafensteiner beyond that.
Now, I must point out that Ivan Floch did win his game 2, so it is now 2-2.
As we expected.
We are getting down to this final game to decide our entire match here.
Which could be decided in a fairly haphazard fashion.
It doesn't feel so haphazard when 3 of the 4 things that you target have the exact same name.
That is fair. It's actually the marginally randomized bombardment, isn't it, really?
I mean, at this point, it will be a planes or a different planes that gets destroyed by haphazard bombardment. At that point, it's just bombardment.
Fine.
As things stand, Andrzej Strzelecki, at least he's been able to get permanents on the battlefield. However, in terms of even just the number of creatures in play, that Siege Gang Commander really built out Tobias Grevensteiner's board very nicely indeed. It means that he's able to actually leverage the advantage he gets by blowing up lands. Looking at it, actually, Andrzej Strzelecki would have been a little bit flooded had he not had all of these lands blown up, because he's hit land drops ever since the haphazard bombardment came down.
Yeah, well, it's at least a bit of flood mitigation, I guess, if your opponent has haphazard bombardment and goes for the land destruction plan. That said, if Grevensteiner bounces his own enchantment with Blink of an Eye, which he still has 2 copies in his deck, then recurring it and going for the land destruction angle again, eventually Strzelecki is going to run out of lands.
But now, what Strzelecki does have going for him here, Serra Angel and Tiana, Ship's Caretaker, both flyers in play that are large enough that they can really make life difficult in the air for Tobias Grevensteiner. Serra Angel, in particular, can just keep on swinging in. The vigilance there, meaning that she's good on attacks and on blocks, has been doing that job ever since Alpha, and it has been working out for pretty much that entire time. Cold Water Snapper, the one creature that is big enough to really do too much damage to Andrzej Strzelecki here. And we see it swinging in, and I can imagine the temptation for Strzelecki here to line up some amount of multiple blocks.
Yeah, I would imagine putting the Knight of New Benalia, the 3-1 and the 2-2 Knight token in front of it. So it's kind of the obvious block. Yeah, it might not work out if Grevensteiner is holding a pump spell or a removal spell. That said, if it is an instant speed removal spell, you're perfectly happy if he points it at one of these mediocre ground blockers rather than, say, Serra Angel. So yeah, this seems like the obvious block. You don't want to add more creatures or put a flyer in the way. Yeah.
I mean, I guess realistically, if you think that there's an instant that's going to make your blocking go badly, you would have to put so many other bodies in front that you would be losing a quality creature.
Yeah.
All right, back down to 4 lands for the 4th time?
Yeah, this game could still take a while, although Serra Angel has been in Magic for a long time. Flying Vigilance, one of the better 5-drops around. She is going to put Tobias on, well, currently a 5-turn clock.
I mean, let's not underplay this. I know it's early on Sunday morning. No one wins the GP on a Sunday morning, but let's be fair. If Strzelecki wins this, he'll have won past the Siege Gang Commander, essentially a large part of an Armageddon, fat monsters that are bigger than anything he's had on his side forever. That'd be a great comeback if he wins this.
We've seen some fantastic Magic from Andrzej Strzelecki over the course of this weekend. He had a very impressive game finish middle of the rounds yesterday, and he's just one of the best players in the game right now. And if you're looking for someone who can find a way of turning around a situation like this, Andrzej Strzelecki's not a bad bet.
Yep.
One thing that I want to touch on is the difficulty of like building sealed decks or team sealed pools in this format, because well, you already see several gold cards here in play. Many teams had pools with plenty of gold cards, maybe along with some of these triple colored cards like Benalish Marshall, and the amount of options that you get in terms of different configurations of 2-color decks, maybe 2-color green decks with a splash, or perhaps even single-color decks. It's staggering. Coming off of Ixalan block, where building team-sealed pools was much easier. You effectively had 4 tribes, and you chose one that you wouldn't play most of the time. Here in Dominaria, team-sealed, it is pretty tough. And some of these pools, especially when you have a lot of gold cards, several of these triple colored cards, and not a whole lot of fixing, because there is not that many fixing in the format, they are really tough to build and will take a lot of effort to get right.
Flavor win in chat. The comment is, Stratsky has been quite lucky to draw so many lands, honestly. And the commenter, back to basics.
Well, speaking of flavor wins and white decks, yesterday we had another nice example of aggressive white decks where there was a Juggernaut coming out, which got then equipped with a short sword. Where and at that point we were already wondering, how does that really work? A Juggernaut with a sword. Then it was dubbed a knight. So then we had the Sir Juggernaut coming in. And then even it got presented with its trusty steed, a Pegasus Courser. So then you have this Pegasus Courser having like a knight,
So
knighted
maybe
Juggernaut
it was just a
on
knight
its back.
cosplaying as a Juggernaut the entire time.
With a short sword in there somewhere. Not really sure how that works, but it's a motley assortment of cards that actually go pretty well in white aggressive decks.
Sanctum Spirit here coming down for Andrei Stratsky as his Serra Angel continues to rule the skies. The life total's now 9 to 10 in Stratsky's favour, and he has a pair of life linkers in play. Could he be putting this together?
He's doing it. It's so good. So good. That's not a terribly professional thing to say. I appreciate I'm not giving any insight at that point. But just as a fan watching the stream, so good.
And there's a massive array of keyword abilities on the creatures that Andrei Stratsky has in play. On pure power and toughness levels, these boards are broadly fairly similar. But when you've got the amount of flying, the amount of lifelink, the amount of vigilance, the amount of first strike going on that Andrei Stratsky is working with, it makes life very fiddly. But a big Academy Drake with Kicker here could really change things. We now have a 4/4 flyer on Tobias Greffensteiner's side of the battlefield. That means that the brakes may have to go on for Andrei Stratsky when it comes to these Serra Angel attacks.
Yep, or the Serra Angel is just going to trade for Academy Drake, like force the trade here before maybe Tobias finds a removal spell for the Serra Angel. But yeah, looks like we're getting into a good old-fashioned board stall.
And the reason for that looking relatively clear here, because Avon Sentry coming down for Andrei Stratsky, yet another flyer for him. So he has Avon Sentry alongside Tiana Ship's Caretaker. Couple more flyers, each of them 3 power. Now, there's one flyer in play for Tobias Grafensteiner that is naturally a 2/2, but gets bigger with every instant played. Instant or sorcery played, though instant's more of a concern in the blocking here.
Yep. Well, even if he grows it into a 3/3, that won't be big enough to get past Tiana, which still has first strike. So I guess Andre can start attacking with 1 flyer, perhaps even 2. You know, force a block, and then still have a flyer left over that can attack in the air. I guess you have enough ground blockers. Maybe attacking with both of the flyers is reasonable. A little risky if Tobias says, yeah, I'll take it, and then use some flurry of instants to couple together an instant win on the next turn. Ooh, nice.
Merfolk Trickster, I like this quite a bit here, because typically Merfolk Trickster, the best that it can achieve in many circumstances is tapping something down, but it also causes creatures to lose all of their abilities to the end of turn. So that angel falling from the skies no longer has first strike, and ultimately getting in the way of somewhat angry Cyclops, finds itself working its way into the graveyard. And now Andrei Stratsky's board, yes, he's got that Pegasus Courser that means that he can send something to the air, but he needs to be a lot more careful because the sheer number of creatures that he has to work with compared to his opponent not looking overly exciting all of a sudden.
That was a pretty sweet Merfolk Trickster. It's even a wizard, which sometimes matters for these red-blue decks.
Frank, do you think in Team Sealed, which obviously has a higher power level than regular Sealed, is Run Amok a card that Toby might be running here? +3/+3 in Trample?
For Tobias, I'm not sure it really fits his deck.
Right.
Well, it might. It could be in there. Red-blue also cares about instant sorceries. He already has the 1/3 that only taps for that type of mana. Maybe a Gitu Chronicler. I mean, Run Amok, it only pumps attacking creatures, so it is a bit limited. It only fits in a more aggressively oriented deck.
Right, okay.
I think it would be better suited for Andre's deck, although it could still go into Tobias' deck. One thing that is actually important to keep in mind with this card in the format is that if you are planning to kill an attacking creature with something like a Sheevan Fire or a Vicious Offering, you should do so in their beginning of combat step before they actually declare it as an attacking creature, because then if you say try to burn it, they cannot play Run Amok in response and boost it yet.
So a triple block there on the Rampaging Cyclops does mean that it firstly only has 2 power, could only kill off 1 creature, killed off the Sanctum Spirit because that was the one that was potentially the biggest threat there. Stratsky gained a little bit of life and gets a Davenant Trapper down, which means that if he has future historic spells, he may be able to tap down a few creatures, potentially force through damage on the ground, in addition to whatever his Pegasus Courser can achieve.
Well, currently as it stands, Stratsky is pretty far ahead. Has a 2-turn clock in the air thanks to the Pegasus Courser. Could just block this Skeldon Raider with the Davenant Trapper that he just played, and has reasonable blockers for all of the other creatures that Gravensteiner has.
Now we see lots of pointing going on. Part of that might well be that Stratsky is just working through his options alongside various of his teammates. Thomas Hendricks and Ivan Floch, their matches both completed now.
Yeah, blocking with the 3-2 is also fine. It was a bit risky if Tobias had an instant speed way of dealing with the only legend, but keeping Davenant Trapper around is more valuable if Gravensteiner has nothing. Yep.
And it turns out that Gravensteiner does have nothing after picking up game 1 with a pretty impressive way of reinforcing mana issues that Andrei Stratsky had. Haphazard Bombardment not working quite so well in that final game, simply because, as it turns out, if you draw enough extra lands, that land destruction doesn't really do very much. Who knew?
Yeah, so Siege Gang Commander didn't get to fire off lots of goblins. Haphazard Bombardment didn't work as an Armageddon. Serra Angel had flying, and so did the other things that had flying. So that's kind of the story of round 1, but that was a really good match to kick us off on day 2 here. So more from the 3 of us in just a minute. We're going to bring you Time Walk Magic from the back table, and we'll do that after this. Hello everyone, welcome back to Good Morning Magic. Rich, Tim and Frank in the booth here with you. We've had a great start to the morning with that Andre Strasky comeback, lots of lands and some flyers. Eventually got past the haphazard bombardment, but we've got more Magic to bring you, so let's head on down back to the start of round number 9 on our back table. And let's slow that right back down to regular speed because it's too early in the morning for 4 times the speed. Because do you know what's better than 4 times the magic? Magic. Let's just do it like that, eh? There we go. Svein and Bjornerud, Andres Nordahl and Espen Nordahl up against the multinational team, Stepan Susic, Alexa Talarov and Panagiotis Papadopoulos. So here we go with the call, Tim and Frank.
So we've already seen a Vicious Offering taking down that first Misa Unicorn from Andreas Nordahl. Nordahl, it turns out, is on blue-white. Took a little while to find that second colour. Along comes the Pegasus Corsair. So in terms of the creature base, actually relatively similar to what we saw earlier from Andrei Strasky. But Alexa Talarov on blue-black, and that not a colour combination we've seen quite so much in our feature match area. What's blue-black trying to do, Frank?
Well, blue-black is more like the historic control deck. In the late game, you just draw a bunch of cards, play a couple of historic spells, but there's not as much synergy in blue-black as in other color combinations. Looking over Alexa's deck, it just feels like a regular controlling deck. Weight of Memory for card draw, Vicious Offering for removal, a couple late game bombs in Bolas's Clutches. It's got to be one of the best uncommons in the set, along with a Tempest Djinn in a deck with 9 islands and a Skittering Surveyor. So that is what he's trying to do. Andreas is on the white-blue deck, which is a little different from what we've seen from Andre. A bit less aggressive and even more focused on flyers with the Sarah Angel that didn't get there. But he also has Zahid, the Djinn of the Lamp, as a big payoff card in the late game.
Yeah, that's a super sweet card. Love Zahid.
Big syncopate there, stopped the Sarah Angel, but one thing that is worth noting, Alexa Talarov still on just 3 lands. He's got an Eviscerate in hand, he's got another Vicious Offering, but he has to be careful with what he casts each turn, because realistically on 3 lands he's not casting more than 1 spell anytime soon, whereas a full 6 mana available to Andres here, and he, with his Jousting Lance, able to get stuck in spite of the Academy Drake on the other side of the battlefield, thanks to the first strike and additional power granted by that equipment.
So there's Blink of an Eye, Blessed Light in hand for Nordahl at the moment, plus 1 more.
What I was a bit surprised by is, the decision from Nordahl to attack, because you effectively trade 3 damage for 5 damage. But then I realized that Jousting Lance, which turns the Pegasus Corsair into a 3/3 first strike on your own turn, doesn't actually grant first strike on the opponent's turn. So that makes the attack, of course, much better, because Nordahl wouldn't have wanted to block the Death Bloom Thallid and lose the Pegasus Corsair in the process.
So we have Academy Drakes on both sides now. Davenant Trapper following it up for Andreas Nordahl. Him able to leverage the fact that he has so much more mana available than Alexa Talarov. Worth noting that Espen Nordahl already a game up against Stefan Susic. Panagiotis Papadopoulos already 1 game up on Sveinig Björnerud.
Looks like we're getting settled for a good old-fashioned damage race. Vicious Offering dealing with the Trapper, which is, conveniently a creature with 2 toughness, so capable of being killed, and the type of creature that could prove to be quite important in a damage race type game with the historic Rider.
Talarov just gradually drawing out of his mana woes, and there's kind of the age-old adage that if you have to choose whether or not to not have enough lands or to have too many, if you're the one that starts off without very many lands and draw into lands, that probably means you've had a whole bunch of spells in hand, so you can bounce back relatively well, and that might be what we're seeing here. Eviscerate coming down to deal with that equipped Pegasus Corsair, and now there's just an Academy Drake and a Lance for it on the battlefield for Andreas Nordahl. He's going to have to do something to bounce back a little bit with all of that mana he has available.
That isolated chapel that Telerov just played, it's for a very minor white splash for Teferi and Ref Capuchin.
Minor in terms of number of cards, not in terms of impact of cards, I would suggest.
True.
Which is,
That's
of course,
what I
the
meant.
nature of the splash.
One would hope.
Blink.
So, blink of an eye with kicker there. Drawing a card alongside. Love the kicker mechanic. Just offers so much flexibility. In the early game, you've got things to do. In the late game, those things are just bigger.
The Jousting Lance is doing a lot of work for Nordahl. The card has performed quite well, especially in blue-white decks, which generally care more about the historic team than other colors. Also some nice combos with cards like Quende, which make creatures with first strike even better. And just a fine card if you ever get into a semi-long game, which it is at the moment, to make sure that you can keep on attacking.
So Aether Glider coming down for Andres Nordahl, the 2/1 flyer for 3 that cannot block. Obviously the fact that it's an artifact is helpful in this set in a way that maybe it wouldn't be in many others, as it does trigger those historic triggers. But how do you feel about the 2/1 that can't block?
In general, it is so-so. Although, evasion is more important in this format than usual, because you get into board stall so often. And it is actually perfect for a white-blue deck with several cards that care about historic, triggering, for example, a Relic Runner to make it unblockable. So it is especially perfect for this particular archetype.
And Svanning is able to... Andreas is able to continue his attacks here. Sanctum Spirit coming down post-combat. The 3/2 lifelinker, there's no cards in hand, so it's not going to get indestructible anytime soon, but the lifelink, when you're in a race, definitely helping out.
Well, this is going to be pretty close.
Cloud Reader Sphinx, a big draw there, and lets him scry. But the first strike on that Aether Glider might be enough to close this out.
Well, Telerov can always keep back both the Cloud Reader Sphinx and the Drake, so that he can line up a double block for the Aether Glider and take it down even through first strike. But he also has to keep in mind that Nordahl might re-equip the Jousting Lance to the Sanctum Spirit. That's usually quite appealing to turn to improve the power of a lifelink creature. And 5 power first strike. Well, I guess you would still be able to double block it with the Sphinx and the Academy Drake and still take it down in the same way.
I can tell you that the winner of this match will almost certainly be our main match next round, because they'll be one of the 2 remaining undefeated teams in the building. So we'll bring you the last undefeated record in the building next round in the company of Riley Knight and Raf Levy.
Yeah, this is, of course, Time Walk Magic. We've already had our main live match. Just as soon as we get on to round 10 being ready to go, we may have to kind of speed through this one a little bit. But right now we're going to bring you as much Magic as we can. Right now the matchup completely even Stevens. Panagiotis Papadopoulos 1 game up against Fanning Bjornerud. Espen Nordahl a game up against Stefan Suchik. And this one, well, they're still in game 1.
I'm wondering how to attack here. If you just attack with both creatures when it's equipped like this, then Telerov might want to... Well, he could block the Sanctum Spirit with Cloud Reader Sphinx, just take it down, but then he has to jump block the Aether Glider with the Drake, which means that he doesn't have a good block for the flyer on the next turn anymore. If you attack with just the glider, then Telerov is almost certainly going to double block with both of his flyers. If you attack with both, maybe he still has to do that. Depends on his hand, basically. And if you equip it to the Sanctum Spirit, well, that might also be quite good, because then, sure, Telerov can block the glider with the Sphinx, but then has to jump block the Sanctum Spirit, but then he just loses a Calico Skin Witch. all lines have some merits, and it's all gonna come down to actually what Telerov has in hand. But Nordahl goes for, well, just the current situation as is.
This way around, I guess he's got the most mana up for whatever he wants to do post-combat, though I can't imagine there's too many 9-drops available to Nordahl at this point.
No. Alright, so Nordahl is, well, if the board stands as is, he's happy with this, because it means that Telerov doesn't have a lethal attack. Telerov has to then jump block the Istir glider, right, because there's first strike on the next turn, and then, well, loses on the next attack. But this changes things.
Yeah.
In Bolas clutches, getting especially painful when you're attacking, when you're stealing the one creature in play that's equipped, because it means that the equipment also doing work, can't even re-equip it across to anything else, no other creatures to equip to. Alexa Telerov picking up his game 1, and we get a chance to jump across to see game 2 in progress for Panagiotis Papadopoulos against Svanning Bjornerud. Black-white in the hands of Svanning, and green-black with a little bit of white going on as well for Panagiotis Papadopoulos here.
Yeah, and the white splash perfectly reasonable for Shalai there, which we've often seen in a white X deck where the green ability hasn't been useful. But here we see where actually he's going to be able to potentially, if the game goes long enough, spend 6 mana and pump his team.
Worth looking at the life totals on this one,
yes.
though. It may well be that this game is not long for this world.
Correct, yes.
Nope. Papadopoulos on 1 life. Any creature that connects will spell game over. And interestingly, I saw a Seal Away in Bjornerud's hand, the white enchantment that can exile a tapped creature. That is exactly the type of removal spell that you don't want to see when you just need to get rid of any blocker, because, yeah, Seal Away is not the best when you are trying to go on the offense.
If only he had an Icy Manipulator, this would be so much easier.
Oh, well, this might be it. The Eldest Reborn forcing Papadopoulos to sacrifice a creature, and now it's 2 blockers plus an Icy Manipulator versus 4 attackers. I don't think that there's anything of 1 green mana that can save Papadopoulos here.
Nope. That is game number 2. So back we go to Nordahl Telerov.
Yeah, we can't show you Nordahl Suchik because that one has already been completed. Espen Nordahl winning 2-0 over Steven Suchik. We now get a chance to see a little bit more of Nordahl versus Alexa Telerov, and an early start here that looks pretty potent from Andreas Nordahl here, able to potentially attack in unblocked for some number of turns.
And we saw Telerov think for a little bit at the end of the second turn there. It looks like he was bluffing Vicious Offering. I don't think he has the black instant in hand, but he did show it in the previous game. So by just spending a couple seconds thinking at the end of Nordahl's turn, he wants Nordahl to think that he has it in hand.
So I just spotted one card in Alexa Telerov's hand that we didn't see in game 1. It appears that he has, in addition to Teferi in his deck, Khan Scion of Urza.
Oh, really?
So
hello.
If you're looking for a way that your blue-black deck that doesn't have quite so much synergy to generate some sort of long-term advantage and win games, one of the 2 best Planeswalkers about, at least for this format, will do it.
Yeah, as if 1 Planeswalker wasn't enough.
I mean, he didn't see the Planeswalker in game 1, but he was able to find the win regardless. Call the Cavalry here, generating 2 Vigilant Knight tokens.
This is one of the better 4-drops in the format, especially for white decks. Many white decks are perfectly happy to go white, especially green-white with Shanna, Cisse's Legacy as the uncommon. But even other white decks can use all of those knights quite well with equipment like Jousting Lance. There are also spells like Charge in the format that give a global boost. So lots of small synergies that go well with Call the Cavalry. Besides that, 4 power and 4 toughness for 4 mana is generally above the curve, especially when you attack on Vigilance.
Now, unfortunately for Alexa Telerov here, he has got Khan in hand. I mean, that's not the unfortunate bit. The unfortunate bit is that Relic Runner plus a Jousting Lance is the sort of thing that's very good against Planeswalkers if there's any kind of historic follow-up.
Yep. Yeah, I mean, if you play Karn here, let's see, you can create a token which is XX, where X is based on the number of artifacts that you have at that point. So currently a 2/2. This means that if Nordahl doesn't really have anything, Teleroff can protect his Karn by blocking. But if Nordahl has, some kind of bounce spell or removal spell, maybe a pump spell, anything, Teleroff may actually be losing his Karn for not a whole lot of value. Yeah, you really want to have a better defense locked up, ideally, when you play the Planeswalker. It's still fine, but this was not the board state that Teleroff dreamed up when he put Karn in his deck.
Fledermaus in chat asks, are these national teams or not? The left team seems Norwegian, at least judging by their names. So there's no compulsion to play with people from the same nation, but there are 3 Norwegians on the left.
On the other side of things, though, a slightly more international team, Panagiotis Papadopoulos from Greece, Alexa Telerov,
Serbia, best Serbian player of all time.
And Stefan Sucic.
Now you see, I think he's Serbia as well. I think.
So
Croatia? Could be Croatia.
That's one for you to look into.
I will. I'll go do that for you.
In the meantime, though, Karn has been taken down.
It's Croatia.
It did not take too much extra to deal with the Planeswalker. Time of Ice there, able to tap down, ice down, if you will, that construct. When it hits Chapter 2, it will ice down another creature, tapping it and not allowing it to untap. And then when it completes its saga, Chapter 3 is to bounce all tapped creatures.
Yeah, it's especially good against creature tokens like the one from Karn, because they're never going to return when they are bounced. So currently Nordahl seems to be pretty much in the driver's seat, with the ability to tap down the next blocker that Teleroff plays, equip Jousting Lands, get in for 8 points on the next attack. It's gonna be hard for Teleroff to come back from this position. And Relic Runner that you see over there, generally speaking, not a great 2-drop, given that 2 2s or 2 1s are not all the best in this format, and you do need quite a lot of historic cards to make it unblockable reliably. Maybe like 9 or 10 historic cards before I would be happy. But white-blue have a lot of these cards that trigger when you play a historic spell. So if you focus on it, you can fill white-blue decks with enough historic cards to make Relic Runner into a pretty reasonable 2-drop.
And here comes an equip. A Knight with a Lance seems very appropriate, flavorful, and indeed potent on this battlefield, attacking for 6, some of it first strike, and another Relic Runner here.
Yep.
Next turn, Alexa Telerov is going to have that board look a little bit clearer as Cloudreader Sphinx comes down. That one will hang around and indeed allow a Scry 2 for Alexa Telerov. At this stage in the game, it's late enough that he can have a feel for what it is that he actually needs, make an informed judgment as to what he wants to keep on top.
As you may have spotted, Tim, it's time for a bit of Timmy Time Walk action at top speed. Turbo Timmy Time Walk action, if we could. So double the speed, because the pairings are up for round number 10, and we will find out which of these pairs or sets are going to be coming up in the next round, because one of these sets will be undefeated at the end of this match.
Well, here comes Tempestian from Alexa Telerov. He has 3 Allens in play, so currently a 3/3 flyer alongside his 1/2 on the ground. But right now, I think that Andreas Nordahl, given that he only needs to deal 4 damage and has a Relic Runner in play that he can potentially equip with a Lance, looking in pretty good shape here.
It is. Using all of those blue tempo cards, Time of Ice and then Blink of an Eye to temporarily get rid of all of Telerov's blockers. Yeah, 4 life is not a safe position for Telerov at all. I guess you could just attack with everything. Yeah, then Telerov has to chump block the Relic Runner, otherwise he dies.
Along comes Sanctum Spirit.
Yeah, now there are 3 lethal attackers. Telerov needs 2 blockers, or a blocker and a removal spell.
He had a Teferi in hand. Teferi not too great in this exact situation. Planeswalkers are good, but... So we have an unblockable Relic Runner.
Yeah, so now Telerov needs a removal spell and a blocker, I guess. Although I'm not sure if the Knight is coming in. Might be that Nordal was playing around some stuff.
That's a Raf Capuchin and a Blink of the Night.
Wow.
All right. Alexa Telerov just barely hanging in this game.
He's hanging on by a thread. Now Telerov has to contend with the Ace Tier Glider that could turn into a 4-1 flying first striker on the next turn. Preferably have some kind of removal spell for that. And a blocker for, well, the alternative of a 4-2 first striking Knight. Man, that Jousting Lance is doing a lot of work.
And a Deep Freeze on the glider there.
Yeah, now we can line up a double block for the Knight. So even if Nordal equips it with the Lance, then you effectively trade 1 for 1. Ooh.
Adamant Will.
I'm a fan of that one. +2/+2 and indestructible, enough to make sure that that fight was not a particularly fair one. Relic Runner back alongside that Knight. And a little bit of removal. That's kind of what Alexa Telerov's deck's characterized by. Academy Drake now going down. How many different creatures do I need to be able to actually win this game? Well, we found how many. It was exactly that many.
And now it is the decider. It's Telerov against Nordal. It's game number 3. Panagiotis Papadopoulos has defeated Svein and Bjornrud. Nordal, of course, a long time ago beat Stepan Susic. This is going to determine an undefeated team. I can tell you that there is only one near perfect record, because the other undefeated matchup, it was a draw. So 2 teams remain undefeated there. So next round we will in fact not see the winners of this as our main match, because there isn't a last undefeated match to look at. But here we have Nordal piling through, and that does it. Nordal and Bjornrud take the victory, and that wraps up round number 9. Here we will be right back, Raf and Riley, with round number 10 after these messages. Bye.